Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. Please like what I like. My name is Joseph Gladding, and with me is my brother Michael Gladding. Today, he has picked the movie, so Michael, why don't you go ahead and introduce us?
All right. We're doing the 2004 Japanese animated movie Dead Leaves. I like to think that I do not ask for much. You don't have to sit with me, look at me, we don't have to touch. You don't have to go for a ride on the back of my bike. Please like what I like. Dead Leaves. It was a cooperative effort between among three different creative forces, three different groups. The anime studio that it was done by was Production IG. Before Dead Leaves, they had a hit with the Ghost in the Shell anime and TV show. Also, at the time, Blood, the Last Vampire from them was very popular, although I don't think that has stayed as popular as Ghost in the Shell has. So around this time, they were looking to maybe take more risks than other studios would have been willing to do at the time because they were flush with cash and their previous successes were not with safe bets. They had become a studio that attempts things that other studios either were afraid to spend the money on or wanted more of a formulaic title to make their money with. All right, so that's the studio that put Dead Leaves together, but the actual look of the movie was a collaboration between an indie manga artist who goes by the name of Imai Tunes. He was a very Western comics influenced mangaka and artist. You can find some commercials he worked on that he did without these other people working on it if you want to get more of a idea of his style. He also did a short run of a manga that actually Dead Leaves is more closely based on with Pandy and Retro. So the main two characters of Dead Leaves are essentially his creation. But I would say that the overall frenetic look and very dynamic approach to the anime itself came from Hiroyuki Imaishi, who's the director of this Dead Leaves project. At this time, Imaishi was still a member of Gainax, which is a different anime studio than Production IG. Gainax is one of my favorite anime studios growing up. They did Nadia, they did Gunbuster, which is a great OVA series about a giant robot, which was very influential. And of course, Gainax had already done Neon Genesis Evangelion by this point. And that was the first project that Imaishi had helped on for Gainax, but he was a low-level employee at that time, so his trademark visual style, it doesn't really come into play as much with Ava. But if you come in to Gainax repertoire around there, you can kind of see his influence on what Gainax would make sort of coming more and more into the forefront in their later years, like Fooly Cooly, which most anime fans in the US saw on Adult Swim. He wasn't the series director on that, but I would say his style comes through a lot more on Fooly Cooly than other Gainax shows before that. And of course, Gurren Lagann, another giant robot cartoon. Between that and the gag anime Panty and Stocking, and that had the most Imaishi telltale signs in them. But after Gainax broke up, which would be after Dead Leaves was made, Imaishi would go on to co-found the studio Trigger, which is one of the most celebrated studios still working today. They did, for example, Kill la Kill, and I think Kill la Kill has a lot in common with Dead Leaves. So yeah, when this came out, I was a big fan of Gainax, but I wasn't aware of the connection between Gainax Studio and this project, because this is something Imaishi did with Production IG rather than with Gainax. So it was just happenstance that I kind of came across this. I remember just seeing it on the shelf, I think at either Best Buy or Sam Goody or something.
I think the word Sam Goody alone dated us.
Yeah. Yeah, not only did people used to get most of their home entertainment in physical form, but we used to have to go to specific stores depending on whether we wanted to watch a movie or listen to music or read a book. and you'd have to go and get a hard copy of just that thing.
I still do it.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot that was still an option.
Yeah, mostly just for movies. I like a vinyl every now and then, but MP3s
Yeah.
are fine for me.
I'm not saying people don't do that anymore. I'm just saying it's become less of the main way people get their entertainment. You had to do it that way back then, pretty much, unless you wanted to just watch whatever was on cable. So yeah, it was just coincidence that I happened along the DVD, but my curiosity was rewarded. This was not always the way taking a chance on a mystery anime works out. Like back when Joe and I were getting into anime, we kind of couldn't afford to be as picky as we are now. Maybe Joe might think of it less this way because by the time like Pokemon and DBZ's like revival on Toonami took off, it got a lot easier to find more niche anime. Whereas in like the most of the 90s and the late 80s, if you were lucky enough to find an anime film or a few episodes of a TV show, if you were interested in that medium, you kind of just had to go for it and take a chance on things, or you weren't going to see much anime. Sorry, my notes keep falling off my lap.
Just on your lap.
Yeah.
Were they just loose, like loose papers?
No, I have a notebook, but it keeps flopping off. Yeah.
Just like when you said that, I pictured in my head just like a Mr. Magoo type battle between you and sheets of paper as you tried to read it.
Got my pile of Post-its on one leg and a reheated Tupperware full of spaghetti on the other leg.
Okay, I've numbered the pages, so I won't read them out of order.
Okay, yeah, that DVD that I happened upon at some point, I must have lent it out because I don't seem to have it anymore. It happens now and then. I'm the kind of person who likes lending things out enough that I will sometimes just accept that I'm not going to get it back.
Yeah, it's like giving someone a gift, and then when you get it back, it's like they gave you a gift you didn't remember you had.
Yeah, but yeah, unfortunately, that DVD is still, as far as I know, the highest quality transfer of it you can get in English. I went looking for a Blu-ray of it and couldn't find one. That DVD that I had gotten is not in print anymore, so you'd have to buy a used copy. It's on Tubi, which if you're listening to this now, you probably took advantage of that, but that Tubi copy seems to just be the English dub from that DVD. So hopefully someday we'll get a nice restoration of Dead Leaves. Because it's so like fast and detailed that being able to just like pause now and then and get a clear picture, it would be fun.
Yeah, it really snows you with information.
So Dead Leaves, I would say it's not for everyone. Could see this being sort of polarizing, but I doubt there's anyone out there that hates us with a passion. But Dead Leaves is somehow simultaneously very of its time and also unlike anything that was coming out at the same time. Like, of its time, I mean, like, if you think about it, Adult Swim had started already, South Park had been going strong for a while, and, like, the sort of crude humor that Dead Leaves revels in was very much in the air at the time.
Yeah, it was definitely like early 2000s humor.
Yeah, and, like, if you think about it, the age of Imai and Imaishi at the time, I can kind of picture them as, like, a couple guys who grew up on the 80s sex and violence-filled OVA scene in Japan. Kind of very exploitative, I guess, but not in a bad way. Very titillating entertainment.
Yeah, well, exploitation cinema.
Exactly. The kind of stuff that you'd see trickle in over here during the 80s that kind of made anime a little more infamous than it probably should have been. Kind of came out of that straight-to-video boom in the 80s. And part of how you sold your tape was to promise stuff that you wouldn't see on TV, you know? But yeah, you take like people who'd grown up on these very over-the-top sex and violence stuff, and then, like, ask them to do something hip and trendy in 2000s. They'd probably combine that sensibility for 80s action with sort of crude humor of the late 90s, early aughts, you know? So, like, Dead Leaves kind of makes a lot of sense as a reflection of its time, I think. But then, like, it's hard to find something in anime before Dead Leaves that really looked anything like it. Like, it's kind of detailed and sloppy at the same time.
It reminded me of 90s cartoons like Dexter's Lab and the work of Andy
Yeah, I could see that. That's not what came to mind for me, but like, yeah, I could see that now that you mention it.
Especially in the backgrounds and how like the objects are rendered on their backgrounds. It kind of reminded me of that era of animation.
Yeah.
More than anime, like that is what it conjured for me.
And I think like the shadows and thick outlines that you see in here is very much a 90s cartoon kind of thing. So yeah, it's a movie that revels in its debauchery. Fans of Imaishi's work before and after Dead Leaves would probably be expecting a certain level of perversion along those lines. Like he was working on Fooly Cooley, a very adolescent view of sexuality kind of pervades Fooly Cooley, very boner based. And like, yeah, you got Gurren Lagann. Let's see, the sort of visual look of that. But then, like, Gurren Lagann is a drill-based robot, and then this movie has a man with a giant drill for a dick. Yeah, and then of course, Panty and Stocking, Cutie Honey, Kill la Kill are all very like scantily clad women in action scenes, kind of thing. So yeah, you can kind of see a lot of what he had done before and what he would do after that in here. And then like the showdown between the half naked warden with her tit cannon and Pandy is also kind of foreshadowing of what the girl on girl battles in Kill la Kill would look like. And like it makes sense that the kind of thing that you see in Imaishi's work in Dead Leaves and the stuff he would go on to is the sort of thing that Gainax fans would already have developed an appreciation for, because it's something you kind of need to develop an appreciation for, the over the top fan service, that sort of thing, in order to be able to enjoy Gainax works without like stopping to roll your eyes all the time. So yeah, that sort of thing's not going to appeal to everybody, but yeah, if you're aware of Gainax and decided to watch it anyway, knowing that connection, then you probably, if you're not into the sort of titillation and animation, you'll at least have a thick skin for it. I did go looking to see what people who don't like Dead Leaves complained about, and I definitely saw more than one review where people seemed annoyed that the heroes in this movie love slaughtering police with reckless abandon, and how Pandy reflects on the fact that she feels nothing after witnessing the death of her newborn child. But like,
so it's just like, this movie doesn't conform to my taste, so I don't like it.
I think it's more like, I think people misunderstood the sort of more extreme satire and the more extreme like exploration of how people would feel about their lives in such a chaotic and dystopian world, and took these situations out of it and thought like, oh, these are bad people, I can't root for these people because they're bad, but like, it's a complicated situation. But I think that also gets kind of tricky in that the like plot and world building of Dead Leaves is not something that's done super clearly and cogently. The movie seems to discourage a deep reading of its plot and world, like how the characters talk over the doctor's exposition, or will interrupt him and tell him to shut up, basically, not in so many words. The guy with the crazy teeth seems to be the one that at least claims to know the most about the backstory of the place and the characters. But yeah, you're told.
I happen to like movies that just kind of like
drop you in.
pull up and are like, get in, we're going on an adventure, and then you're just like, now you're suddenly in a vehicle on an adventure.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that I'm kind of having like an ethical conversation where I could understand why people would find the more unsettling aspects of this dystopian world to be particularly offensive or problematic. But I think the problem isn't that it's a movie by perverts. It is a movie by perverts, but I think the problem that's tripping people up there is that the world building that would mitigate these more extreme portrayals, it doesn't come across well enough or simply enough to make its satire make sense. You know what I mean?
I don't know, because like the prisoners are not being treated very humanely in this jail, so I think you could extrapolate that.
That's true. Yeah,
like there's reason for the violence. It's a violent time in general. Like the cops are not being understanding.
But yeah, I think I'm not agreeing with people that have problems with it, but I think I just think
I didn't think you were.
That it's just that it makes sense that
it's not for everybody.
Some people would have ethical problems with a satirical movie where the things that make it satirical aren't very clearly communicated. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I have a sort of theory about anime tropes. Where like I've noticed when a character that's been treated as like fully human for most of the story suddenly gets revealed to either be a clone or an android or otherwise artificially created, the writers in anime series usually seem to expect the audience to either completely turn on that character, the one that turns out to not be fully human, or to, like, if not completely turn on them, to at least lose a lot of their emotional attachments to them. And that's always seemed weird to me. Some examples I can think of, probably the most famous among mecha anime fans, is LP Puru. There's a character in UC Gundam, mostly Double Zeta, that we first meet her as precocious Gundam pilot, one of many Gundam characters that is manning a weapon of mass destruction at a very young age. But she turns out to be participating in a program where the bad guys are making lots and lots of clones of her. In that one, the character of Puru, the first one, dies, and her replacement clone comes out. The show just calls her Puru 2. But it seems like people treat this character very coldly. Like, even the hero characters, who are supposed to be, like, they're not, like, completely virtuous, but you would think they'd give somebody a chance to be their friend if you were close friends with the original version of them, you know what I mean? But that's just one example. But there's also, like, I think Bakano, which has been a while since I've seen, but there's like a subplot about alchemy in Bakano, and one character turns out to be a soulless homunculus that was created by alchemy. And that character herself, once she finds out that this happened, like, wants revenge on the person that created her, which always seemed weird to me as well. Like, it's kind of saying, like, if you're not born with a human soul, then your life should not be given value like a regular person's is. Okay, so these are things that aren't clearly, like, stated in any of these shows, but it
could just be part of the cultural norms.
Yeah, I'm wondering,
and the differences
I'm
with
wondering
our
if
own.
it comes from, a history that's more influenced by Buddhism than with Christianity. Because, like, in Buddhism, as long as you have a soul, then you're kind of like part of this world, and until you are able to extricate yourself from it. You know what I mean? Christianity believes in a soul too, but as a random person on the street, it's like your incentive to treat another person well, as far as the religion is concerned, in Buddhism at least, has more to do with how your future lives are going to go as well as theirs. Whereas it's a lot more cloudy in Christianity, Like, there's no deathbed confessions in Buddhism that gets you a better reincarnation. So it's all like how your soul has performed over the past, like, million years or something like that. That might make, like, a bigger impact on.
Well, I think, isn't part of Buddhism, like, souls aren't really created or destroyed? It's just like there's a set number of souls and they just move vessels. And so if you were created, you're not as of the earth as, like, even an ant would be, because the ant has had a soul that has been traveling the earth for as long as it's been around. So it's like, I think it's like more...
We're saying the same thing, pretty much.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, I think the question of morality and how we treat people doesn't even enter into it. It's how we think of these things. Like, it's not like you don't have a soul, so you don't have a reason to treat me well. It's like you are not the same type of thing. You're closer to a table than a human. Well,
that's what I mean by, like, how people treat each other isn't so much like... I just mean, like, the way you think of somebody is going to come through in how you treat them,
Yeah, I get you. Okay, I got it now.
The way that the world of Dead Leaves is set up, I think part of what we're supposed to take away from what we do get to see of it is that there's, like, law-abiding citizens, and the cops that we see killed basically clones that came out right. Because, like, when we do see the cops out together, they all look exactly the same.
Yeah, all the police and civilians are copy and pasted people.
Yeah, and I think that's on purpose. Like, they're the clones that came out as expected. All the clones that came out not as expected end up in prison.
Yeah.
If we take out the clone part, then we're already pretty close to how life is. But anyway, the freaks in the moon prison, they're freely executed without a trial because they can just be replaced and regrown in a lab and be easily replaced with no family to mourn them, because they weren't born to a mom and dad, they were born in a vat, So, like, everybody in the future world that they're building is born into the world via cloning. And if we do take in our understanding of how souls would work, most, if not all people here would have been born without one. It's basically just machinery, just grinding along into nothing. Like the imperfect clones get weeded out when they inevitably step out of line, and it's kind of like a not quite evolution, but like what's it called when farmers try to get like a good
Culling,
Nah, that's not what I meant.
selective breeding.
Yeah, selective breeding. But anyway, if you're in a society where everyone's a clone and just grown in a lab, when Retro and Pandy decide to conceive their badass gun baby and do it the old-fashioned way, then they've performed an act of revolution. Just doing that, it's like we're now upending the entire basis of how new people come into this world, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And like I think that like we don't normally think of, well, maybe in the 60s, I guess, but like I'm not used to thinking of societal revolution as a sexual thing. I think that setup of how the cloning works also kind of invites a bit of a Marxist interpretation of the dystopia we're given. And they're definitely alienated from their work. We never even really find out what they're doing with their pickaxes and whatnot. We assume they're mining the asteroid or mining the moon, I guess. But they don't get to do anything themselves with the fruit of their labor. Yeah, I don't know if there's a whole lot to be said about the Marxist reading of Dead Leaves that isn't just reiterating what actually happens in the thing, you know? I mean, like, when Pandy and Retro are staging the breakout, it does, recall, like, Bastille Day. I want to talk about the sort of implied cyclical aspects of the movie.
Okay.
Back in the day, the first few times I'd watched this, I convinced myself that this was an implied cyclical storyline, and I still think it somewhat is. I don't think an actual like Groundhog Day scenario works with this, but there are aspects of the Dead Leaves story that sort of hint towards cycles, and that's something that also comes up in other shows Imaishi worked on, like Gurren Lagann also has this kind of spiraling motif to it, and like some people working to prevent history repeating itself and others leaning into it. And again, fiction that comes out of a world that's more willing to accept reincarnation. I feel like, at least, I don't know if everyone that is looking at Asian art from the outside, I think I tend to assume this outlook of history as cyclical being somehow tied to the idea of reincarnation. But I don't know if that's me being like stereotyping to save hard drive space in my brain, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what you talked about earlier with the sort of recycling of souls, and that kind of, if we think of the Dead Leaves Moon Colony situation as cyclical, then that's very much going to be the idea of what's happened to the souls in a situation where everyone's a clone would come into play. And there's kind of like a transhumanist theme that sort of, if we look at this as an almost cycle where some things completely repeat and some things like continue on, then that sort of transhumanist, like we can use science to make us better than we used to be kind of thing. This seems to definitely be what the warden and her lackeys think they're doing. Like the warden wants to take her grandfather or father's work to its logical conclusion, while Pandy, when she starts getting a better understanding of who she is and what's happened, is starkly opposed to that. It's hard to talk to in a detailed way about a story where so much of the like backstory and setting information has been more gestured at than spoken outright, you know. But
Yeah.
at this point, I don't think that Dead Leaves is trying to get across a hard and fast cycle. Like, for one thing, when the warden talks about how they've been gone for 8 years, Pandy and Retro, because apparently they were in cryo sleep for 8 years, and then they wake up, and at the end they go back into cryo sleep, likely for another 8 years, and it's unclear if they're gonna have their memories again. But like, if this happens every 8 years, it seems like the people they talk to only are aware of the last time they were there. Because they're not saying you guys keep showing up. They're saying something happened 8 years ago and now you're back, you know?
Yeah, like I don't know if it's hinting that
Uh-huh.
the exact thing is going to happen again.
Yeah.
But I think it is just supposed to be kind of like the end is the beginning is the end kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think it's hinting that the same thing's going to happen again. I think it's just trying to end the beginning to be like cyclical and
Yeah. Like Gravity's Rainbow.
yeah.
I still think they're kind of hinting at some idea of repetition as like.
Well, I think before they just destroyed part of the moon,
Uh-huh.
but it looks like this time around the prison has been completely wiped out. So I think they broke the chain,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
That could be, but also like the warden definitely seems to die at the end,
Mhm.
and it's hard to think of the work they're continuing without her. But she could have had some sort of failsafe in there that wakes up a new clone or something. 8 years is enough time to replace everybody.
Well, I just feel like the fact that Pandy and Retro won out the day by breaking the cycle of cloning by having like sex and making a baby the right way. I feel like if the movie were to advance a little further and show us that the exact same thing's about to happen again, I'd be disappointed from
Yeah, that would weaken the message,
yeah.
huh?
Yeah, I feel like I
Okay,
would have
yeah.
gotten shifted. So I choose to think of it as like this is now the next phase. Because I kind of looked at the movie as having a caterpillar to butterfly motif.
Yeah, that's true
So
too.
them going into cryo sleep is maybe like
Yeah, the
them
pupa.
cocooning.
Yeah, cocoon, that's what it's
The
called.
butterfly. Yeah.
Definitely some aspects of the movie that are like implying that like cycles are one of the ways in which nature asserts itself.
Yeah, like I wrote a few examples of the caterpillar motif, like everybody squirming around in straitjackets looks like caterpillars.
Yeah.
The chain, like prisoners on the back of the bike, the
Mm-hmm.
train that they steal, the final boss is a caterpillar.
Mm-hmm.
It just had a very like that's what I got out of it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Was that, and maybe that they this time around they'll come out the butterfly instead of just going back to prison.
Yeah. Yeah, I like not knowing what's going to happen next. I'm glad they never made part 2 or anything. I like this movie. It's very fun and colorful. Makes me smile just to watch everything move.
So you said that Retro and Pandy are from something else. I actually had written down that it felt like it was adapted from a longer source, or it was a pilot for a show not picked up, or it felt like an expanded project condensed down, but not in a bad way. It was just like when I tried looking for more dead leaves, I didn't find it.
Oh yeah, I think this is the only thing under that title that's they've done. But like in my tunes, the guy that the mangaka that was brought on boards to kind of give this a more gritty look. I don't know if Pandy and Retro are his characters that he's used in other things, or if it's just that he has similar looking characters that he's used before.
Gotcha.
He's not. He doesn't seem to. I couldn't find too much of his stuff. Like I said, if I can find that commercial I saw, I'll link it to you.
Okay.
But like he's done some work in that, but I wasn't able to find his actual comics. I kind of get the impression that he's more of a designer than like a manga storyteller.
Yeah.
It's just that his art is very influenced by both manga and Western comics. But I think he definitely did the character designs for Retro and Pandy, and then like Imaishi tweaked them to work better in animation. But yeah, I don't know for sure if he used them in previous works.
I have another question.
Okay.
So you've only seen it on DVD and then Tubi, and I'm guessing the DVD you bought was full screen as well. But I, at certain points, got the impression that this was animated to be widescreen.
I think it was.
Some of the shots looked like it was cropped on the left and right sides.
Yeah, I think it's pan and scan.
Yeah, I wrote that down. Like, I paused it at the first split screen. I was like, when it split, I was like, this definitely isn't artistically cropped. It is definitely cropped because it was already drawn and they had to get the information condensed.
Yeah, it's a shame.
I would love to see this on Blu-ray.
But it wasn't a straight to video movie. I don't think. I think it went. I think it was in theaters. There might be like trailers that you can find in widescreen to get like an idea of what it looked like in theaters. But yeah, there's definitely we're definitely missing out, at least as far as the full way this movie was meant to be watched, by not getting an HD release.
Absolutely.
But yeah, this is definitely like a wish list thing. If this ever comes out on Blu-ray, I want it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other things to bring up? Because I think my notes are exhausted now.
Oh, I've got a lot. So I thought the frantic pace, crazy character design, hyper violence, gross out humor, and super prison setting seemed like it had to be the inspiration behind Adult Swim's Super Jail. What do you think?
I love Super Jail. I don't know for sure that the people who made Super Jail would have seen this. Because I feel like Super Jail's conceit is like Willy Wonka Jail.
Yeah, that's true for sure. It just seemed like so close.
Yeah.
And 12 years later that it could be. It's just like they seemed close.
Yeah. It'd be neat to hear what was it Titmouse that made Super Jail?
I don't remember.
To hear if they have any anime influences. But yeah, this in particular, I hadn't thought of it. But yeah, it definitely has some similarities with Super Jail.
I wrote down a couple of things I liked. When Bucktooth gets shot, I like that the word blam goes into the bullet wound and splash comes out.
Yeah, they do the whole like biff bam pow, like Western sound effects. It's neat to see it so often here.
Yeah, great source of comic relief. Yeah. I liked the fact that while Pandy is led to be force-fed with other organic prisoners, Retro is force-plugged in with other mechanical prisoners. I thought that was like a good little, you think they're getting separated by male and female, but one is organic and one is mechanical. But yeah, I thought that the constant action always felt different and easy to follow. Each set piece was stylistically different and it moved different and they felt like they were going for something different and succeeding.
Yeah.
But still managing to make it easy to follow. I didn't feel like any of the artwork, although extremely stylized, became difficult to make out at any point.
Yeah.
And I felt that translated outward to the whole project. It was frenetically paced. It was concise. Every scene was packed with information. But at the same time, I found this movie surprisingly easy to follow.
Yeah.
There wasn't a point where I was like, whoa, what's going on? It was like I was led around by a very competent and coherent story that just happened to move at 2 times speed.
I think, earlier I was talking about how the world building, the way they set up how the dystopia works, isn't communicated straightforwardly. You kind of have to put together how everything.
Yeah, it's like context clues mixed with little bits and pieces you hear from people who get interrupted or otherwise cut off.
It ends up feeling, one, pretty natural, and two, since you're basically just forced to just enjoy what's in front of you and just kind of go with the flow, it becomes like a story that you are very able to get by understanding through general vibes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
If it might have actually been more confusing if they gave you more information, because you'd feel like you have to catalog everything mentally.
Yeah, all the information was given real organic and naturally.
It also makes the characters all likable because nobody turns into either a nag that keeps the story moving or a boring exposition guy,
Yeah.
Everybody just becomes celebrated for how unique they are instead of just having a job to fulfill in the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I can see certain frames in my brain still, and it's making me smile.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I especially liked the ending, the final showdown, if you will, was very everything was really chugging along together really well, and I can just picture the caterpillar and all those circular explosions.
I love how they introduce the gun baby. Where the 2 ladies are fighting and then suddenly there's a gunshot and you look down and it's a hand holding a gun coming out from her panties. Oh, gun baby.
Oh, gun baby.
So that's it for Dead Leaves. Normally I'd say other recommendations if you liked Dead Leaves, but I think I brought up a lot of other anime that Imaishi and Gainax worked on over the course of the episode, so I'd say just check out any of those. We'll probably do more anime over the course of this series, so don't worry. We'll have plenty of anime to watch. Next episode is Joe's pick for Dragon Inn. Can be found on Criterion Channel. You want to make sure that it's the older version and not the remake from the 90s or Goodbye Dragon Inn, which is a related but not the same story.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's been remade, I think, twice, actually. I think there's Dragon Inn, Dragon Gate Inn, and Dragon Inn from 1990.
Yeah, the one from 92 kept coming up for me when I was looking for information on this one.
That one.
So I guess that was a much publicized one.
Yeah. I believe it's a Sue Hark film, or Sui. He's like a pretty famous Wuxia film director. He did like the Once Upon a Time in China movies. I think he might have done the
Is that the
so that might be why it like comes up so often.
the Once Upon a Time in China movies is the ones where Jet Li is playing this like doctor slash martial artist guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I watched like 4 of those. I don't know if that's all of them.
Yeah, they're fun.